Welcome back to Secret Weapons, and today we're taking a look at the Synesthesia by GFI System again. If you haven't seen my first video on this pedal, I really recommend that you go watch that before you watch this. That'll be a much deeper dive into all the sounds on here, as well as the feature set and all the routing options and kind of an overall review of this as a device. We're back today because firmware 2.0 just came out for this thing, and it introduces a bunch of new sounds, arpeggiators, sample and hold versions of effects, arpeggiated versions of effects, as well as a bunch of like bit crush and lo-fi and warbly, vinyl-y kind of sounds as well. I think we're looking at 15 new effects in total here, as well as improvements on some of the old ones. So like I said, we're not really going to dive into the merits of this pedal on its own because we've done that, and there's a video, it's like a half hour long. Like I said, I'll put a link down below if you want to watch that. But instead, we're just going to run through some of the new sounds available to us and why arpeggiating an effect is cool. So we'll switch back and forth between like the flanger and the arpeggiated flanger, and then maybe even the sample and hold flanger, so you can kind of see how those things interact differently than they otherwise would as their own standalone effects. It's funny, I've never had to do something like this before, where so much gets added in a version 2 of a firmware that it kind of feels necessary to do another video just because it doesn't feel complete anymore. There's so many sounds in this thing that aren't touched in that original video. So like I said, we'll make a playlist of the two. It'll be easy to roll through. We'll keep this part brief. Let's go to the top down thing and listen to some of the cool new sounds available to us in the Synesthesia. So we're using a pretty simple board here. Before we jump into the sounds on the Synesthesia, let's just run through what we are working with as our context. So we have the Benson PreAmp, the Walrus D1 and a stereo ping-ponging kind of delay setup, the Specular Tempus running my ever-present and always favorite plate reverb. The 70s plate reverb on this thing is amazing. It deserves its entire own video. And the Strymon Idiridum set on round kind of Fender mode. And then for context, in Luna, our DAW, we are also running a 1073 preamp and an LA2A compressor for a little bit more grit and a little bit more even kind of sound. So let's hear what that all sounds like. Amazing. Oh, and we are using the Harmony Silhouette with mini humbuckers in it. So let's jump into some sounds. Let's start off with our pressed junk sound. So right off the bat, excellent chorusing sounds. If you go full mix at 100, it gets a little more vibrato-y. You've also got a couple different waveform shapes. Okay, I haven't played with that yet. That's called the cube shape. Let's take that, turn the depth down, and drop it deeper in the mix a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, I don't hate that. Can we darken that up? Let's bury it in the mix a little bit further. Actually, I'm curious to know what that's going to sound like with an auto swell in front of it. Slow volume. Okay, let's try a different wave shape. Ooh, there's one called foobar. Let's turn off that slow volume so we can play around with that. Similar, a little calmer. Let's go to a triangle. Crank that depth, crank the mix, and bring back that slow volume, because that thing is the best. A little more speed, way more mix. Warm it up. Random wave shapes. Bring that cube back and kick back over to our giant reverb. Okay, let's move on. So from Press Junk, in that similar space, we have Record Antics, where instead of just like kind of vibrato-y sounds, we have fidelity and sample rate that we're working with here. So we have that set to a medium speed, a medium depth, medium mix. Fidelity's 24-bit, and the sample rate's 48 kilohertz. But what's really interesting is you can, I believe on the intro, I was running something like 6 kilohertz and 6-bit fidelity, and you really start to get some kind of grainy. Yeah, you start to really hear it get chewed up. So let's keep it at 6 kilohertz, but go to like 8-bit. Let's actually bring that slow volume again, because I'm a big fan of these kind of like aggressive textures being hit with like an auto sweller. Let's bring our sample rate a little higher. Or let's bring our fidelity higher, actually. Let's go to 12-bit. And back to our lovely plates. So a lot of these sounds I find are at their best when they're kind of, you almost don't realize it's there until you take it away. So that's obviously pretty apparent. But if we go to 16 kilohertz, it's just the little difference. Lovely. Moving on. So we have some filters. It's called phono filters, and you've got things like a phonograph and clock radio, megaphone, antique phone, that kind of thing. So that's a phonograph. Let's go to cell phone. Notches and peaks, adjustable. So that's still on cell phone. A low pass. Notch that. It's a very subtle, like kind of low pass filter there. And turn up that saturation. So there's a couple of rotary sounds in here. They're both very kind of thin and lo-fi sounding, but they do have their place. The intro song that you heard at the start of this video, the very first couple of notes, that's that horn rotary sound. Don't knock it, it's got its place. And then you also have a drum version. So this is one of those things, bit crushers are so hard to get right because, I mean, when you turn off that drum, you can hear. Like that's pretty much right on the money. You got a low input gain. The crush is set at medium. The frequency is really low. But then you kind of add something like the drum rotary, and you can really create these like broken speaker lo-fi moments. you can hear that noise and that grit and that teeth in the background. Okay, this is one of the things I really like. We have the ARP tremolo. And also one of the things that I love is, and I'm pretty sure this is an update, is the ability to switch between mono and stereo panning on a patch by patch basis without having to unplug cables. So you've got like a, here you go, sequence set to random. Let's go to stereo and really crank that depth. Crank the choppiness as well. I'm such a big fan of kind of the almost arbitrary nature of the stereo panning on some of these arpeggiated tremolos. So cool. So in that same area, you have things like the ARP filter. You can already hear it just from the noise. Oh, filter types. We have low pass, mono, band pass, mono, high pass, mono, and then the same stuff, low pass to band pass in stereo, low pass to high pass in stereo, so on and so forth. So let's grab one of the stereo ones with a random sequence. Okay, so do that, sequence random, 50% glissando on that. We're going to swap it to the other side and throw our ever-present and always beloved slow volume in front of it. And kick that big reverb back on. Let's darken up our tone a little bit. And we'll drop some of that filtering lower in the mix. Just that having the high pass on one side and the low pass on the other side just does such a cool thing. We'll crank it in the mix a little bit so it's obvious. arpeggiated formats. I'm never quite sure what this one is, but I always just know that it's cool sounding. Let's crank the BPM down on it and take out that slow volume. And we have a bunch of different sequences. Again, we have 4 sequences or one chosen at random. I really do like how the Q curve set to high creates some really great grit in some of those like big, like almost like hitting the power rail too hard kind of thing. It's like fuzzy. So good. Okay, so here's what we're going to do here. We're going to close this out with a comparison between the ARP flanger set to random sequences and the traditional tape flanger that I used and fell in love with on the previous one. So, dry signal. Original tape flanger. ARP flanger. Let's grab an actual sequence number 3, turn the timbre down a little bit, and let's actually cut resonance. Let's crank the mix a little bit. The tape flanger. And just all the flanger. Actually, let's try doing a left-right split of the two. So there you go. The GFI Synesthesia firmware 2.0, tons new sounds.